It started with what would Laura Roslin do? And now we're asking, what would Sharon Raydor do? Welcome to episode 9 of the What Would Sharon Raydor Do podcast, where we talk to the woman that knows her best, Mary McDonnell, about Sharon's character, her thoughts, and her interactions with the team. I'm Mina Sharpe, and I'm the editor of MajorCrimesTV.net.
Woohoo!
And this episode, we'll be talking about the winter premiere episode of Major Crimes, Season 5, titled Heart Failure. Just a warning that we will be talking about spoilers about the episode, so if you haven't seen it yet, turn this off now until you have, otherwise you're going to get spoiled. Hi Mary, it's so great to be here.
Hi, Mina. We're really happy to have Mina here doing this. Mina's been such a great support of the podcast. She, as we all know and love, runs MajorCrimesTV.net, which actually has been single-handedly responsible at times for keeping major crimes alive and visible in the world when other potential platforms weren't putting a lot into advertising, etc. And everyone is always very happy to have Mina and grateful for her wonderful insight. And I have known Mina for a very long time now, actually, because she showed up one time when I was doing a convention that many of you have gone to many times. I know so many of you personally because I've met you at conventions. And this one, I think, was it Houston? Was it Houston where we met? Okay, so Mina showed up and became my handler and has been my handler ever since. Once I met Mina, that was that for me. So we've done a lot of different things together professionally, and it's just a delight to have you back. We're very excited about the second half of this season and knowing that we're coming back next year again and knowing that we continue to stay alive in this particular climate. It's kind of a wonderful thing. So I'm just so happy to, I don't think we've done a podcast since life changed with the election. And we've been all very much together out there in Twitterville. I've been listening to you and you've been listening to me and we've been listening to a lot of people. So I'm just happy to have a chance to put our mind for a little while on entertainment and major crimes.
Yes, well, it felt great to see this episode and have the team back and something familiar and comforting back. So that was great. But even in this episode, we're seeing change for the Major Crimes team. And there's a lot of change on the horizon. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, Acting Chief Winnie Davis and her addition and how that's really changing the dynamic. What struck me so much is how, when Sharon first came into Major Crimes, it was a bit of a foil for Brenda Lee.
Yes.
And, we've grown to love Sharon and value it so much about her. And now that Winnie's here, it seems like it's sort of the same situation, but in reverse. And Sharon is now on the defensive instead of the offensive.
Yes. Well, first of all, Winnie Davis has just been a lot of fun. Let me just start with that. And it is reminiscent, only reverse, of when Sharon came to be a foil for Brenda. First of all, secondly, Winnie Davis, as you all know, is played by the brilliant and wonderful Cameron Manheim. And if any of you have met Cameron, you certainly have seen her work. But if you've met Cameron, the first thing that you notice is that when Cameron is in front of you, you're standing in front of a force, and she doesn't have to do a darn thing. And so for me, it's been absolutely delightful because, very frankly, women out there, strong women, many of whom, most of the women I know are pretty strong people. Other than the general kind of oppressive misogyny that exists out there, quite often you don't feel an equal force in front of you. And so you make the mistake of thinking the road's clear. Of course, then the hidden misogyny will emerge out there in the culture, and you see it's more complicated than you think. But in the case of someone like Cameron playing Winnie, it's clear that there's someone standing there, and you're going to have to get really clear before you proceed. So that's been absolutely delightful. And she does come in and she introduces, well, there is a dilemma, which was introduced by the very sad passing of Chief Taylor. So there is, as James Duff put it in our interview that we did last year together on Facebook, it created a power vacuum in the LAPD. So the interesting thing that's going to be visible to all of you as we go along this season is that there are several of us who could potentially fill the assistant chief position. As it's turning out for very different reasons, none of us seem to want it very much, except for Winnie Davis. The problem is that she brings in a kind of pushy, controlling, and oppressive force, and she could be hurtful, not only to our department, but to John Tenney's division, and sort of just the whole issue of the flexibility necessary to fight crime well. And so in that sense, it is a reversal because Sharon was monitoring Brenda so closely because Brenda was such a renegade, and she was always risking the department getting in trouble. In this case, it's a much subtler version because Sharon has a deep respect for protocol, but this woman could actually hurt us.
Yeah, so it is interesting to me that so much, Fritz's comment to Sharon at the end of the episode that, she may need to watch her back. It seems like there is a threat potentially to major crimes.
Yes.
With Winnie or just with this power vacuum in general. They've been the darling of the LAPD for a very long time, and this power change has a lot of potential to change that.
Well, what's interesting about that, Mina, and I think that it's great that you responded to that. I just think that Major Crimes, as always, and this is one of James's gifts, has a certain kind of prescience in its creation. And when James was writing this episode, I can pretty much guarantee that he did not think that the highest office in the land would be filled by the person that it is sitting there now. So the idea of a power vacuum emerging, which it does in this country every 4 years and then every 2, is being filled or usurped or taken by someone who the majority of the country does not feel is good for them or for the democracy. So that's a little bit of the same on a much more micro, which is smaller, Mac or Mike?
Macro.
Macro.
Micro is small.
Micro is the smallest, like a microbe. And Mac is above that, whatever. Okay, so on a micro level, that's sort of the experience of Major Crimes right now, is that people within the squad are actually kind of concerned that a personality and an agenda, and so far it seems to me that Winnie Davis is pretty much being driven by ego and a need to be empowered, as opposed to someone who is, she doesn't seem to have, anyway, as far as I can tell, a big investment in promoting the justice system. It seems like a power trip. I could be wrong, as we get to know her more, but so they're all a little concerned.
Right, certainly a power grab isn't good for anybody in any situation.
Ever. Power is it's a lethal weapon in the wrong hands, as I think we're seeing.
Now, how does Sharon, as she sees that go along, because Sharon is so committed to the justice system and what she's done, she's expressed not wanting to go for this part, but is there a possibility that she might have to just to preserve this?
There's a strong possibility that she might have to, and she really does not want to, because she's been in the politics before. She ran internal affairs, basically. She ran that part of the department, of that part of the LAPD. She's been inside the politics. She's had to be a bit of a bureaucrat in her old position. This situation with Major Crimes, working so closely with the team, actually being inside or out on the street occasionally and really getting down to the nut of the abuse, has been very enjoyable for her. So to pull back out now at this point and have to operate a lot within the politics and bureaucracy, of the LAPD is not necessarily something she's longing for. And clearly, she doesn't need it. So doing it would be for the good of the squad, would be for the good of the LAPD. So I'm sure there's a big conflict. I mean, I know there is. I played her. She feels conflicted.
Yeah.
But not at all martyred. She won't do it ultimately if she really doesn't want to. She's very clear about that, and I think that she has no career path to climb. She doesn't need it, which is the person you want in the office, actually, is the person who doesn't need it professionally. So we'll see.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, it's been several months in real time and in time on the show. And when we left, the summer episodes, Flynn had just had another heart episode.
Yeah.
And, we've gone many months to find out that thankfully he is still with us and he's doing okay. But, how has that second incident now changed things in Sharon's world?
Well, I think it's very connected to part of why she doesn't want to necessarily, fill the assistant chief vacuum, is that life is a very short proposition. Andy has displayed that a couple times now. She is a woman of a certain age who has her heart open again. And that's a different kind of vulnerability and requires a different kind of flexibility. So if you take yourself out of that and put yourself back into a political position, you really are kind of surrendering a certain kind of freedom. And I think that Andy has a vulnerability that she doesn't really want to take her eyes off of for too long. But if she steps into this new position, there's not going to be a lot of time for Sharon and Andy. And she went through a few moments, if not a day or two, where she thought she was going to lose him. So once you realize that about someone, it can change what your priorities are. So there might be a bit of a shift.
So one thing we have to talk about, because it shocked me. I was kind of floored.
Mina was shocked.
I was just watching minding my own business, and I was like, oh my God.
What was that?
Was the punch. Sharon getting herself in that position.
Yeah.
And, it was hard to watch, but it's really an amazing moment for her.
Yes.
What was that like for you? How did that
Well, I thought it was
about?
a really interesting piece of writing. Because in Sharon is always very subtle, so you have to be really smart to recognize what James is doing with her, because he doesn't spell it out. And so immediately, when I saw this, I went back and I looked at it and I kind of tracked it, and I could see how she knew. Well, first of all, she knows that absolutely they cannot let this guy walk. So there has to be something that they provoke or evoke that allows them to keep him, to arrest him. So what she does know about sort of the psychopathic personality, she knows how to push buttons. And I would say some of the men in her past, and certainly Jack Raydor, Sharon knows something about innocent or committed provocation when you're arguing. She knows something about that energy. So she can see that she bugs this guy. She's a woman, so she's going to bug him more. And, we could have Sanchez, go after him. It's not going to faze him. We could have Provenza do his thing. It's not going to faze this guy. And she gets that. So she starts to push and tries to signal to the guys, let this go. I'm going to go a little bit out of my comfort zone here, but just be ready. But I don't think she ever really imagined that she was going to truly get clocked. You know what I mean? All he really had to do was go after her aggressively, and she could back off and they could arrest him for, that.
Right.
But instead, he pulls a fast one and he just clocks her. And it's fascinating to feel it. I was very surprised by how quickly she puts it aside to make sure the agenda is complete before she kind of loses or feels what happened.
Right. Yeah, that was just the escalating tension in that scene.
Yeah.
To then you get that, but then it doesn't. You think that would be the end, and then nope, she's still,
She keeps
making
going.
sure that we're going to use this as much as she possibly can.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting question that left me with about women and physical abuse. It's like if you understand that you're risking it, it's a little bit different than if it's completely and utterly, it's a lot different than if it's completely and utterly unprovoked. Now, did she set out to get the guy to try and punch her? No. But she did want him to do something physical that they could interpret as aggression towards a police officer. And she knew it was up to her. So that's a different way in which you feel, oh my God, I just got hit, than if you are out of the blue, as most women are who are abused. They're abused without any kind of provocation. It is a disruption and dissonance in the abuser's personality. So it was all interesting to realize as it was happening, and that she didn't want it to be wasted motion. So she had to get the focus off of her until they were sure they had the guy in cuffs.
Right.
And then,
it was a great scene. I like that. How was that for you, just playing that? Because it's so different from what we generally see.
Yeah.
She is very reserved a lot of the time. And and this was very different.
Yeah. Well, it was enjoyable to do because it is a different part of her that she doesn't readily show us. And I like it when I understand how to move in a stunt. I don't like stunts where I'm like, I don't really get this, and I don't want to run, and I don't want to climb and jump and things like that. I mean, those days are really, truly behind me, and I don't have any interest in doing my own stunts. But in this case, I had to be good at it, because otherwise you can't fake that. So I really had to understand the velocity, like in the movement, like if somebody hits you and you're throwing down, like how do you throw yourself down on the table? What does that feel like? And I found that I felt pretty confident in it. So I enjoyed it. Spike was right there. He's a genius, and clearly nobody wanted me to really get hurt. But there's always a risk. Yeah, I mean, every time, I don't think people really understand the amount of risk that actors take, particularly in series television where the lead actor wants to do, or, the number 5 on the call sheet wants to do their own stunt because they trust the people around them. They've been working with them for years. So they're like, I'll jump off the roof. No, we got to say, no, I want to do it. I trust you guys. And it can become kind of fun, but there's a lot of risk. Absolutely. Yeah, but we have a great team. We have a great team, and they're very, very big on safety, so we were cool.
Well, it looked amazing. I mean, I couldn't watch it when they played the replay. I couldn't even look at it because it was.
I'm sorry to say that's great, but yay! I'm glad.
Yeah. So at the very end, we get a different kind of punch. And this from Fritz, letting Sharon know that, that's possible Stroh is back.
That's a bigger punch. It's a bigger punch.
Yeah.
It's that is a time stood still for a second for her when he tells her that, because, it's always been in the back of your mind. We don't know where the dude is, right? But it isn't in the front of her mind, because otherwise she would have to live in fear. Rusty would have to live in fear. We would all be living in fear, and there's not a lot of usefulness in that. So to have him suddenly start showing up in Florida or wherever it is that they think they've seen him is that was pretty terrifying moment. And it's the kind of thing where you just don't want it. You want to wake up and say, oh, that was a dream. You don't want to think about Stroh. He's the most evil character in this franchise that we've ever dealt with. And to think that he may be emerging again and be a threat to Rusty, be a threat to her, be a threat to all of us, really. He hates us all.
Right. And Sharon seems like she's in a much different place now. It's been several years. She has this relationship. Yeah. Rusty is so much more established and not as fragile. But this is just throwing them all back a
Oh, yeah,
couple years.
because we're all fragile when it comes to Stroh. Stroh, he's like Houdini. He gets away, he kills whoever he wants, and he's a maniac. So there's a vulnerability to all of us when it comes to Stroh, even though Rusty, hopefully, would be a little bit smarter and a little bit more cautious. You know,
more agreeable, hopefully.
more
with
agreeable to
measures.
whatever we have to do.
Yeah.
Although you never know with that adopted son of mine what he's going to be agreeable to, or what he's going to be doing at the time he's doing. Like what by the time Stroh gets his ass from like Florida to California, Rusty may be a detective by then. I don't know. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
he may be a judge. It depends on how long Stroh takes. I joke, but in the reality of the show, it is probably the scariest thing that could happen for their personal history. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It really changes the dynamic of everything.
Yes.
To think that is now hanging over their heads in a more present way.
Yeah.
All of a sudden.
I loved this episode for Sharon and Fritz because, and particularly when he brings up Stroh to her, because Stroh is a huge problem for Fritz. Stroh almost killed his wife, and Fritz has a very big emotional situation around that particular criminal. It goes, Brenda scratched the guy's face to get his DNA under her fingernails. That's how hard she fought to put this man away. So I was kind of moved by that scene when I read it because it was Fritz and Raydor with a real common personal enemy.
Yeah. No.
Fritz, I've liked Fritz and Sharon's relationship this second half of this season. It's been interesting.
Yeah, it's been lovely to see that dynamic shift as it has, but it's really seemed to. I'm hoping they'll be more on the same side as this all keeps moving forward, both in Stroh and with the chief position.
No, there's some really nice evolution with those two characters the second half of this season, for sure.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to tell us about anything? Or
Gosh, I don't know. These are great questions. Does anybody else here have anything? Like, I'm sitting here with Chris Jory, who you all know is my wonderful friend and collaborator from, I don't know, forever, right? Since college. We've gone in and out of working together. And Maggie Marion, who's been my amazing on-set assistant this year in Major Crimes, and Chelsea Acapelli. Is that right? Am I saying it right? I love saying her name, and I always think I'm saying it wrong. I think it's one of the prettiest names ever. Chelsea Acapelli, who you all know because she is our podcast hostess and many other things. And so we're all sitting here together for the first time since we wrapped. Anybody else have anything they want to ask about the episode or ask me or any comments they want to make about the episode? And I'll repeat it into the thing. Yeah. Yeah.
The idea of taking one for the team.
Yeah.
That's something that Sharon seems to do a lot. And you mentioned that she would never be a martyr, and that's just because I don't think that's the way Sharon thinks, or the way that you think either, or the way that you make Sharon think. But taking one for the team, is there a point where you would draw the line? Like, what are Sharon's? If Sharon's willing to get hit for the team, Sharon's willing to take a job she doesn't really want for the team. What is the way? How does she feel her role is as part of the team or the leader of the team, and how does she take those responsibilities? How do those responsibilities play out in her?
Well, I think a part of it, so what Maggie was asking, what she's curious about is Sharon's Sharon's propensity to sort of take one for the team. And I would say that that's been true in Sharon's life. I mean, she could have divorced Jack Raydor a long time ago, but in order to give the team a father, she just figured out how to raise these kids as functionally as possible without ejecting him. Part of that is her Catholic background, part of it is a lot of things, but most of it, whether, it's not religious, it is the nature of Sharon. She is she is not a narcissist, let's put it that way. Sharon Raydor is not. I think that's fair. Don't you think that's fair, Mina?
I think so, yeah. Very much.
So a person who isn't narcissistic by nature can compromise themselves for the team, whether the team is family, society, whatever, right? Job. And I think that the dilemma that we talked a little bit about earlier and that you're bringing back is that Sharon is at a point in her life where, and this does happen when you get to be a certain age, where you kind of go, I can't keep spending my personal savings on the team for the rest of my life. Because, very frankly, you just don't have the hormones. Taking one for the team requires tremendous amount of hormonal output. And so you get to a different point in life where your body, you're not supposed to be manufacturing all that. And so you go, well, what do I have to, how can I keep doing that while trying to keep myself healthy and keep myself rested and keep myself, you just don't have the adrenaline that your body produced for you when you were 20 or 40. It's a different kind of, expense account. So I think it is a dilemma. She can't always be taking one for the team and be able to avail herself to this new life that has suddenly appeared, which is one of love, one of potential retirement, all those things that are coming at her. That, by the way, and I just use this because it happened in my life, is Sharon is seeing all of her friends, even though we've never met her friends. We know she's got a ton of them. She's seeing all of her friends retire. She's watching them traveling. She's watching them letting go of the stress of taking care of the world. But it's juxtaposed to the world she's living in, which is a world in which we had Hillary Clinton at 68 running for president. We had Bernie Sanders at 70 running for president. And now we have this other person of the same age in the office. And so the baby boomers are not retiring quite the way other generations prior to them did. So it is sort of a matter of I think the dilemma is trying to figure out really what's the most energizing thing you could do. Continue to be in the world? Does that feed you? Or do you need to have a personal more? I think Meryl Streep said something so fascinating, I think yesterday or the day before. She gave her second political speech in her life, really. Truly. Was the other day, I think she was being given a humanitarian award from Human Rights Watch or something like that in New York. I think it was in New York. And she went a little bit further in her assessment of the current administration, and she kind of really she spoke to it much more directly. And she said she had come to a point where she had decided to abandon what she would normally do, which means, I think I'll cook or garden. I don't want to get involved. And she said she realized that to do that was actually more draining at this critical point in our society than to get out there and speak up and use the power that she had. So I think it's that kind of...
It's a balance issue.
It is.
Both for Sharon, I think, and
for
all of us, trying to figure out where we're fitting into the world and the dynamics that are, affecting us all, and how much we can engage. And I think for Sharon, how much she can engage with these different things.
Right.
Greater good versus obligations to yourself.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, is the theme of this season.
It is?
Balance, yeah.
Balance is, let me talk to you guys about the themes of, you know how, do you know this, all of the fans out there, because James talks about seasonal themes. But honestly, sometimes the actors can't hear that because you can't act a theme. You can't. And if you hopefully, but quite often mistakenly or unconsciously promote the theme in the choices you're making, he's very excited, as he should be. But you can't act the theme. I remember having a talk with Kira about this. I said, that's so cool. He kind of names this season and stuff like that. She goes, no, it's very helpful when you're sort of reading the overall arc, but then you have to like blank out, because then you go to do a scene and you go, am I promoting the theme in my choices? And it was very funny. We had this really funny conversation, because actors, acting, quite often you have to know, you have to go blank to do the real work, because your character doesn't know anything about balance thematically. But you're right, Chelsea, this whole conversation. So I'm afraid that James Duff just kind of knows what he's doing a lot of the time. Okay, so we sort of touched on a little bit, everybody, the situation politically in the country vis-a-vis this episode of Major Crimes. And I don't really want to use this podcast to get into it, but I do want to say that the other night, I had a truly profound experience, because I finally had the time, because I now, I'm voting for the Oscars, etc. And I finally had the time to really, a couple of days, to go through so many choice things that I had not yet had a chance to view. And I had the great opportunity to finally sit down and look at the 13th, which is the single most important documentary I have ever seen in my lifetime. And it helped me so much, because we're struggling against the idea of racism. We are always struggling against the promotion of poverty. And for this, Ava's brilliance was able to bring me historically from the time I was 10 and aware of all of this through, last week, basically, between the immigration situation that we're facing, or the deportation, the ugliness of that, and the fact that they began drilling again at the Dakota Access Pipeline, and the treatment of Native Americans by the law enforcement in North Dakota, which has been abhorrent at times, and certainly not law-abiding or constitutional. So there's a lot of stuff going on right now that this documentary was able to open my mind, because, I am a white woman who grew up in very comfortable suburbia. So I have been raised in a privileged white class, and yet I had a very good family, and I had a lot of people around me as I was growing up promoting democracy and humanitarian issues. And so much of my family, there was a consciousness about humanity. And yet I still came out of this world. So to see the brilliance of the historical perspective on mass incarceration was just, I recommend it to every single person out there who listens to this podcast. If you have not seen the 13th, watch it, because it is exactly, we are in the middle of this. It is the most important thing right now, to support inclusion, to support fighting, to support protesting what we think is unjust and unfair, and being smart enough to understand what's being done every day. I think this documentary is something I just wanted to take the time and promote. And other than that, yes.
No, well, thank you so much for having me.
Okay.
This was very fun.
Okay,
I
it was
really
a pleasure
appreciate
to
it.
have you, Mina.
Yeah.
You're so insightful. You really are. Anybody else want to shout out anything? No? Okay, so we'll be back week to week as we did, right? Here, I'm going to put Chelsea on for a minute so she can say a few words. I'll be back.
Hey, guys. So you've been listening to the What Would Sharon Raydor Do podcast. We will be back week to week as we have the last season, or as often as we can. If you have questions, please send them over on Twitter using the hashtag WWSRD. You can comment on Facebook under the post that has this podcast. Hopefully you're listening there, or if you're listening on YouTube, you can comment there. Of course, you can always find us over at MajorCrimesTV.net. Yay! Yes. Any questions that you have, please shoot them over. We love to feature them. And Mary, do you want to close us out?
I will. It's really good to be back with all of you, and I'm looking forward to lively questions and lively discussion in the next 8 weeks or so. I don't know how many episodes we have left. How many? 10? 8, 9?
8. There's 8.
Yeah, 7 more this year, and then, of course, we have next season. Bravo, TNT.
Yay.
So all I want to say to you is this podcast has been brought in part to you by MajorCrimesTV.net. Okay.